I think in order to really understand astrology, you need to start with astronomy basics, because they both used to be the same thing, you know? Modern astrology uses the 8 other planets in our solar system, including Pluto. From closest to furthest from the sun, it's Mercury, Venus, then us, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, then Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Each planet has different orbit rates around the sun. On Earth, it's 365 days. Everything in astrology is from the vantage point of us on Earth. In the astrological year, it's the sun that moves across the sky in 365 days, right? The moon makes a cycle around the Earth about every 28 days. Mercury's orbit is only 88 days. Venus is 288 days. Mars is much further from us than most people realize. Its orbit is 687 days to get around the sun. Jupiter is 4,333, or almost 12 years, and Saturn is 29 and a half years, give or take. These planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, can be seen in the night sky with the naked eye. These were the planets used in ancient astrology. They didn't use the other ones. They didn't know they were there. And all of these planets are visible in a certain part of our sky called the ecliptic. Not everybody realizes this, but the planets and the sun and even the moon, they are embedded on the backdrop of the constellations. And that backdrop of constellations rises and sets very consistently. Like at night, you'll see the constellations come up over the eastern horizon and set on the western horizon over the course of some hours, just like the sun does during the day. And in fact, there are constellations up during the day too. We just can't see them because the sun gives way more light than those stars do. And in order to understand astrology and in order to understand why ancient people were so interested in the movement of the planets in the night sky, it's important to understand that these planets do not stay in the same spot compared to the backdrop of those constellations. And neither does the moon. And honestly, neither does the sun. And of course, our Earth rotates every 24 hours, and we can see the sun rise over the eastern horizon and set in the west. And that is true for the planets and all of the constellations. Because the planets are much closer to us, the light that they give is much brighter than the surrounding stars. And in addition to that, the planets are not part of these constellations. One night, you'll see it in one spot. The next night, it will be in a slightly different spot. And you'll see the planet over the course of time, depending on its orbit, move through a constellation and come up at a different time of night. Of course, they all still rise and set on the eastern and western horizons, but their position where they are embedded within that background of stars changes over time because they don't orbit us, they orbit the sun. And not only that, these planets, not the sun or the moon, but the planets sometimes begin to reverse direction and go back through the constellation they were just in retrograde, because these planets defied the motion of the heavens and seem to have autonomy from time to time. Ancient peoples prescribed godlike qualities onto these planets. The word planet comes from the Greek word for wanderer, and belief systems around the world, most famously Greece and Rome, developed around the idea that these planets had some sort of will that they enacted on the earth. However, everybody thought that everything in the universe rotated around the earth, right? Because that's what it looks like from our vantage point. And as a lot of people know, this was a key tenet of the Catholic faith, but it did not account for apparent retrograde motion of these planets. Many of us learned the history of these science concepts in school, a geocentric model versus a heliocentric model of the solar system and the heavens. Because most things in the sky appear to orbit the earth, and yet not these planets. Planets did not move in the same predictable way as the background stars, and for them to reverse direction totally goes against the motion of that background of stars and the sun and the moon. However, planetary retrogrades were predictable It just took a long time to put together the pieces. These planets did not orbit the Earth. They must orbit something else, and ultimately it was determined that they orbit the sun. Why does it sometimes look like planets are moving backwards through the ecliptic over the course of like a month or longer? Smaller movements, but for longer periods of time. All planets in the solar system, including the Earth, operate on approximately the same ecliptical plane as one another. You can think of it like a track, and the different orbit lengths and rates are different lanes in that track. And on Earth, we are also on that track. Mercury goes retrograde the most often. Its orbit is only 88 Earth days around the sun. Imagine how it looks when someone is running around a tiny little lane on a track and you're further out. Eventually that person gets so far ahead that they turn and come back. When someone's on the inside track compared to you, they're going forward, and then when they make that turn on the track, it looks like they're going back. Have they actually gone backwards? No. They're just on the other side of that loop. And when planets go retrograde for a minute, it looks like they've stopped. When someone's really far ahead of you in a race and starts to make the turn, have they stopped? Or are they just turning? And we don't have a Mercury retrograde every 88 days or whatever, because we have our own movement on our own track that affects our perception of that planet from Earth. Since Venus's orbit is much closer in length to our own, it goes retrograde less often. It goes retrograde, I think, every year and a half. Mars goes retrograde about every 2 years. The interpersonal planets, Jupiter and Saturn, both have orbits that are much longer than Earth's orbit. In that case, when they look like they're going retrograde, it's actually us making a turn compared to them. And again, for long periods of time, it looks like maybe they have stopped in a certain part of the ecliptic. When you are lapping someone in a race, especially if they're on a really far track out, have they stopped moving? Or does it just look that way because of your own path? So Jupiter and Saturn both go retrograde yearly. Jupiter goes retrograde about every 9 months and spends 4 to 5 months retrograde. Saturn retrogrades yearly and spends around 4 months retrograde. Outer planets were added to astrology after their recent discoveries. Uranus's orbit around the sun takes 84 years. Neptune's orbit takes about 164. And Pluto's orbit is about 248 Earth years. All of those planets spend about 4 months retrograde yearly because, again, their retrogrades are determined by our position and our rotation around the sun, since they move much slower than we do. People don't understand that astrology is literally where these planets are located at a given moment in our ecliptic, as well as their position to your vantage point on Earth. It's a map, and it's literal. People will also use the fact that astrology takes into account retrogrades as a way to disparage it. Retrogrades were mystifying to ancient people. And even though, yes, it's, quote, an optical illusion, they still hold meaning today. They're correlated with certain events that often happen during retrogrades of certain planets. On the next episode, I think that we will talk about the zodiac signs.